that preventing burnout is even possible, or do you believe that nurses just limit the extent of the burnout by using tools and methods?
I don't know that stopping burnout is possible. I don't even know whether it's desirable. I do know that when you take a middle-class kid and send them to college and they've never seen sickness or death in their families, and they've never seen the devastation that disease or sickness can do to weaken people. The more we're sterilized in our society, the harder it is for nurses to be able to endure the heart-wrenching sights they're going to see in a hospital. Most of the kids who can afford to go to college are kids who've been protected to a certain extent. So I think there's going to be a learning curve on how to deal with sickness, the smells, the sights, the trauma of seeing how fragile human beings are, how mortal we are. And I think that's always a shock for a young person, that we can blame, we can say this caused it, that caused it, but once you see enough people who are as good or better than you, or who's gotten sicker than you've ever been, you can't use that anymore and blame them for their own sicknesses. You know sometimes that they're sick just because they're sick. They're sick because there are unseen forces in the universe that we don't understand. They're sick, and the question for the nurse is only and always, how can I help? Part of relabeling burnout as compassion fatigue is infuriating in certain ways, because burnout makes you sound like one of those light bulbs who at least, burned bright for a while and suddenly just went pop. On the other hand, compassion fatigue sounds like you ran out of compassion, and it's like you had a limited amount and couldn't do anything. It doesn't consider the fact that you're put under circumstances where you're overworked, underpaid, and you get no autonomy for the responsibility that you have to take. I mean, a nurse would have to have the education of a doctor in order to know when to call a doctor, because otherwise, if you call a doctor too soon, too many times, it's like the boy who cried wolf, and they won't come. If you call too late, the patient's already had terrible damage done to them. So you have to know a lot of stuff about different diseases, a lot of the treatment choices, a lot of observation has to be done where you add up what that doctor is going to add up by the time he sees that patient. And then you have to know when to call them in. You have to be able to counsel them when they want to talk to you about their dying or their sickness, and you have to be able to give them enough information and assess where they're at, the same as a social worker or a psychologist would. You have to know how they fit into their family. So you'd have to be, or know when to send them to a financial advisor. When they die and the family's asking you, you have to know all about funeral directors and stuff. So you'd have to have so much education that you wouldn't tolerate. The smartest and the best of us are not going to tolerate the disrespect, the limiting of how we practice. Once we spent the time, once we put in the money, once we cared enough about our patients, all of that stuff, if they set up support systems, if we had an organization to back us so that we felt safe in our practice, if there was a big enough membership because we knew what our organizations did, that they could lobby effectively for the needs of the individual nurse, not only for the profession of nursing, because I honestly don't know whether the policymakers have ever made a bed or when they stopped making beds. I think that it's the same problem as with Wall Street and Main Street. I think there's a big disconnect. I'd like to see that disconnect connected. I'd like to see nursing organizations talk in plain English and say to nurses, this is what we can do for you. But in order to do this for you and make it meaningful and not just legalese, we need you to support us because everything takes money because we're working on a money model now in corporations. I think that that kind of support might be able to help burnout. A bigger problem or a bigger transformation is that when a nurse begins to see both the failures of healthcare and the miracles that happen outside the realm of science, she or he begins to look farther, wider. Whether you want to call it a God, a higher power, whether you want to call it energy, whether you want to call it intention, all of these things require different tools than the ones you're taught to use in the corporate world. They grow your soul up. And I think that to use yourself as a tool is something that takes courage and learning and introspection in either path, but neither path allows you the choice of martyrdom. That's been done already. If you're going to be effective as a healer, and the shadow side of a healer is a martyr, so you're going to have to grow out of the martyr and into the healer. Any nurse, you can do it. You can do it by expanding scope of practice, by fighting for your rights, by telling your stories to make the public more aware. There are multiple business opportunities now because as a nurse, remember, you've had to learn to think quickly, to add a whole bunch of stuff together to make a diagnosis. You've learned to work with a team. You've learned to help other people. You've learned science and math and anatomy. I mean, you know people, you know what makes them tick. What in the world, then, can't you handle once you've been a nurse? I mean, being a nurse prepares you for almost anything else that happens in the world. So if you're not happy at the bedside, make policy, but make it better for nurses at the bedside. And if you're not happy making policy, then go into business. And you can make that better. If you don't want to do business because that's too restrictive, start your own business. Tell your stories until things are brought into the light, until the light is shined on the dark aspects of human beings, nothing will ever change. Burnout is what happens to good nurses when their hearts break. That's all burnout is.